those who work in the NHS aren't particularly looking forward to the next few weeks because they're saying that's when what's already happened and what's already the infections that have been passed around over the festive period is that they've been baked in, and that's when it's really going to hit. We've already got dozens of NHS trusts declaring major incidents, sharing resources, and it looks likely that the next few weeks are going to be very sticky indeed if you happen to work in a hospital where there are an awful lot of staff vacancies, which are making it significantly worse.
Freddie, take us to the Times and this story, a warning about the threat from Russia. The Admiral Sir Tony Radakin, the new defence chief, has some quite serious concerns.
Well, yes, if you listen to the sort of foreign policy experts of the world, there's been a sort of drumbeat of concern about Russia, particularly Ukraine and now over Kazakhstan in recent weeks. But I have to say, I do feel sometimes a little bit sceptical about these stories about hypersonic missiles, because you do feel they're a little bit briefed out by people with sort of intelligence interests who are always quite keen to sound as hostile as possible towards Russia and Putin. I'm not saying that Putin is not a dangerous menace to the free world. He is in many ways. But I think when it comes to talk about hypersonic missiles and things, sometimes these stories can get a little bit overblown.
Susie, the Admiral's particularly concerned about crucial underwater communication cables being tampered with by Moscow. And if that were to happen, he suggests that that would be considered as an act of war.
Yep, those are the undersea cables that carry most of our internet and our data all around the world, a lot of them in the Atlantic where there's been more Russian activity. And while the Russian Navy is extremely ancient, creaky and rusty, run by conscripts, it is able to actually intercept those cables and cause severe disruption. He's saying that would be an act of war. And what's interesting here is that the line that Freddie mentions in the second column about Tony Radakin saying we're going to need to develop hypersonic missiles. Now, those are missiles that are so fast, they travel a mile a second. They're so fast that by the time they've blown you up, you still haven't seen them. You know, by the time you've noticed them, you've been obliterated. That's it, you're gone. And there is no defense system in the world that can protect anybody against a hypersonic missile. Now, they're being developed by the US, by Russia, by China. And he's saying here that we are going to have our own. What's interesting about this is that we started on a concept with the French back in 2011, which was stepped up in 2016 for a joint Anglo-French hypersonic missile called Perseus. And in last September 2021, we were going to be signing a memorandum of understanding with the French to push things forward so we could get that hypersonic missile and protect ourselves with it. Unfortunately, we then had a deal with Australia about submarines, which meant Australia dropped the French submarines, and therefore France delayed signing that memo of understanding. And it looks likely now that we wouldn't even get Perseus until the 2030s, maybe even later. Tony Radakin told Parliament this week we're going to have to try and find someone who wants to build that missile with us now. So we're in a situation where we really, really need one of these whizzing new missiles. Everybody else is getting one, and we could be in serious danger if we don't. But we've upset the only person that we were building it with. So we're now going to have to either find billions and billions and billions of pounds to build our own, or try and piggyback on someone else's design. It's all a bit sticky, really.
Freddie, take us into The Guardian, and this is the story of the Attorney General for England and Wales announcing that she could refer the acquittal of the Colston Four to the Court of Appeal, and this has not been met too kindly by some.
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of concern in the Conservative press and among Conservative MPs about this case. I mean, I think it does set a dangerous precedent when you say that destruction of public property is something that can be let off if it's considered that the cause is right. And I think that politicians are right to raise their concerns about it. And it's not necessarily meddling with the judicial system to say so, as the Guardian piece suggests.
Susie, your thoughts? Is it meddling?
Yes, because the jury system, it doesn't set a precedent in criminal law. Okay, so if a jury decides to acquit someone, whether they're guilty or innocent of what they've actually done, if the jury decides you haven't committed the crime that's worth us convicting you for, that's what our jury system is for. And it's not up to politicians to question that. However, if what Suella Braverman does is to refer it to a higher court to look at it again, then that would actually set a criminal precedent which would affect future cases. So it might backfire on her spectacularly. And anybody who's concerned about statues being made to go for a swim might want to ask themselves how they felt about the statue of Saddam Hussein coming down in Baghdad and being hit by people's shoes, or statues of Lenin and Marx coming down after the fall of the Berlin Wall, or indeed the removal of swastikas after the Allies liberated Europe. We take down things that we don't want to glorify anymore, and no one ever wanted to glorify Edward Colston. Even when they put the statue up, nobody wanted to do it. So it seems fair enough to me that he took a dunk.
It doesn't say what Suella Braverman's point of law is that she's concerned about. So that's quite interesting. It'll be quite interesting to see how that pans out.
I'd just like to chip in and say I'm generally against taking down statues, even of people I find despicable.
Because
I just think it's bad precedent. You know, if you don't like something that's a public monument, you shouldn't take it down. I mean, you can talk about Saddam Hussein, but that's in a war situation. I think that's slightly different.
What's your view on statues that you find the people despicable? What's your view on them being placed perhaps in a museum or somewhere else, but not being on public display? Is that an alternative?
Well, I mean, I've seen statues of Lenin, and I think Lenin was a fairly despicable figure in many ways. I've seen a statue of Stalin erected in someone's private garden, and I think that's despicable, but I wouldn't tear it down. I just don't really believe in doing that. I think it's a silly thing to do, and particularly with public property.
OK, we're going to have to leave it there. I know Susie probably wanted to come back in. Freddie and Susie, we're going to take a break. For the moment, thank you very much. Coming up, the vacation stampede. The Mirror reports that travel giants are seeing a huge spike in bookings after restrictions were relaxed for the fully vaccinated. We'll discuss that and more next.
January is a nationwide campaign that's empowering people to move every single day of January to beat the winter blues away, so to support their mental health. So we're seeing people up and down the country enduring lots of different ways to move their body, including walking, cycling, running, swimming. I founded the campaign 7 years ago after witnessing the positive impact that regular physical activity had on my mum's mental health, especially during the winter time, a time of year where as a nation we're much less active. We report lower moods, lower energy levels. And 7 years ago, there wasn't really a campaign out there to support people during that time. So I created one. And here we are 7 years later with over 200,000 people in that community all taking a really positive step forward. It's more about enhancing your life rather than depriving yourself of something. So in essence, the campaign is really there to help you form a healthy habit that will support you well beyond January and that works within your lifestyle as well. So it's very much enhancing your life.
Running every day at the beginning was hard, but there's an amazing community on Facebook that just encourages you when you have days where you feel like giving up. And now I've got a little injury on my foot, but I'm doing CrossFit at the local gym, Bear Walden. I'm doing swimming, I'm doing walking with the family. So I'm including exercise every day. And I know how much it improves my mental health. I mean, days when you're sort of lying in bed and you're thinking, I can't. And then I always think that you take those small steps. You get out of bed, you have a cup of tea, even preparation the night before, put out your gym stuff or your running stuff or even your walking stuff so that it's there ready. And I think it's just taking it at your own speed, as small as you need it to be or as big as you want it to be, moving and getting out there, getting some fresh air, even opening the door and just breathing in that air. It all makes such a positive impact on your body and mind.
Registration is still open and you can sign up for free at redtogether.co.uk. And when you sign up, we'll be there sending you newsletters to help support you throughout that journey. And as we've mentioned earlier, if you do want to be a part of the online community, you can join us at Red January UK across Facebook, Instagram and Twitter as well.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. Still with me, Susie Boniface and Freddie Gray. Welcome back. Let's have a look at the Mirror and this story about people feeling free to book holidays now because they're double jabbed. It makes it a lot easier, Freddie.
Well, yes, I mean, I would say slightly watch out because the possibility that booster jabs will be required on a vaccination pass in the future has not gone away. But again, I think like the first story we discussed, I think this is a sign of good news. I think this is a sign of increasing optimism about the crisis. And again, let's not get complacent. But I think people are beginning to feel that we can have travel again in the future, and that's an encouraging sign.
But if we've learnt anything, it's a movable situation, isn't it? Nothing stays still for very long.
Well, it's been a terrible, terrible time. And I mean, I hope for the travel industry, finally we're through this because I'm not sure it's going to be able to cope with another wave of cancelled holidays and refunds and so on.
Yeah. Susie, a huge spike in bookings is being reported. Jet2 Chief Executive Steve Heapy saying people are absolutely desperate to get away.
Of course, and if I was running a business that had been severely suffering in the last 2 years, as soon as I got some bookings, that's what I'd be saying too. But this is the busiest week of the year always for the travel industry, so this was always going to be time. They should have had a bit of an uptick anyway. I'm sure the announcement about easing travel rules has made it easier, but we also don't know quite when these bookings are for, of course. One assumes that a lot of it's going to be over the summer when we can all be a bit more experienced now about how the pandemic's working out. We can probably all assume that the summer's going to be better than the winter. So, that's not bad news. There is something a bit grim towards the end in the copy there where Sajid Javid apparently warned the Cabinet that if you keep off the travel restrictions and you encourage all these holiday makers, that massively increases the risk of importing a lovely fresh new variant to cause us problems next winter. So while I'd love to be as optimistic as Freddie and go, it's all marvellous, we're over this now, I think the possibility is that...
I did not say that. I didn't say we're over this.
No,
I think the thing with variants, right, as far as we can, the thing with mutations, as far as we can tell, is you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Suppression of the virus leads to mutation. Spread of the virus leads to mutation. So I think it's a very perilous situation. I'm not being overly sanguine about that.
No, and you didn't say it was all over. Susie admitted that. Thank you both. Thank you both.
It's 6 o'clock. This is Sky News Breakfast. Here are our top stories this morning. UK scientists say there's no immediate need for a fourth COVID jab as the current booster gives older adults strong protection.
The booster is not only working, but it's working for a long period of time.
Downing Street drinks fresh claims by the Prime Minister's former advisor, Dominic Cummings, of another garden gathering during the first lockdown. A third day in detention for the world's best tennis player as the blame game continues over handling of Novak Djokovic's vaccine exemption. Overcoming the odds, the refugee children determined to succeed in the classroom after a challenging start to school. In sport, England's cricketers have it all to do to save the fourth Ashes test with Australia. The weather, wind and rain will spread eastwards today with sunshine and blustery showers following, but tomorrow looks drier. And at 1:45, we'll take a look at papers with the broadcaster and author, Gemma Forte, and the deputy editor of Spiked, Tom Slater. Hello there, a very good morning. Thank you for your company today. And we start with a positive development in the fight against the Omicron wave sweeping across the country. UK scientists say COVID booster jabs provide 90% protection against hospitalisation in the over 65s for at least 3 months. And this means there's no need for a fourth jab for vulnerable people just yet. But protection for older adults who haven't had a booster is much lower. The UK Health Security Agency says it's prioritising rolling out first booster doses to all age groups. That's as the pressure grows on hospitals facing both a shortage of beds and staff. Shannon Freeman-Powell has our first report.
In the last week of December, 3.7 million people in the UK were infected with coronavirus. But while cases remain high, they're not as severe, and the JCVI credits the booster.
People aged 65 years and above have over 90% protection against being hospitalised. And most importantly, they are protected for up to 3 months from their booster dose. So that's really, really good news. The booster is not only working, but it's working for a long period of time.
While Omicron causes milder symptoms than previous variants, the sheer number of cases means hospitals are overwhelmed. And the medics we usually rely on to look after us are barely coping.
I think the fact that we've had to bring the army really demonstrates the huge pressures that services are under at the moment. And my members will tell you that it doesn't feel like it's stabilising at the moment. And at the moment, they can't see an end to it.
Hospital staff across the country are exhausted and burnt out. And now the surge in Omicron cases is creating shortages, with many staff off sick and unable to work. But with almost 40,000 NHS staff off sick because of COVID, there are fears that assistance from 1,800 armed forces won't be enough. As it stands, the number of 111 calls are on the rise. Ambulances are waiting more than an hour to hand over patients, and a lack of social care is preventing 10,000 people from leaving hospital beds. But despite this, some experts are hopeful.
We don't know whether there will be any further nasty mutant strains. Always variants are happening. Whether any of those becomes worse for the human race, and particularly us here in the UK, remains to be seen. But at the moment, we're certainly on the right path for Omicron, and it looks to me as though the health service will survive.
There will be more tough times ahead, but there's optimism too, that the darkest days of the winter wave may soon be behind us. Siobhan Freeman-Powell, Sky News.
Well, we can show you the latest COVID data now. The United Kingdom recorded 178,250 new COVID cases, as well as 229 deaths in the past 24-hour period, bringing the total number of deaths within 28 days of a positive test to 149,744. Well, it might be a new year, but the allegations of sleaze surrounding the Prime Minister continue. Boris Johnson's former advisor, Dominic Cummings, is now claiming that another rule-breaking party was held in the Downing Street garden just a few days after staff were pictured enjoying cheese and wine. Sky's chief political correspondent, John Craig, has the latest.
Following the disclosure about Lord Brownlow, the Tory donor, lobbying the PM for a pet project, a great exhibition, well, who should pop up but our old friend, Westminster's favourite pantomime villain, Dominic Cummings. Here is a 14-page blog under the headline, Parties, Photos, Trolleys and Variants, and we're back to the allegations about the partying in Downing Street. Now, there's good news and bad news for the PM from Mr Cummings, his former aide. 15th of May, that's the one that featured on the front page of The Guardian a few weeks ago and has aroused all sorts of controversy. There's the photo. 15th of May was no party, says Mr Cummings. But the bad news for the PM, the inquiry should look at the 20th of May, when there was another socially distant drinks, he claims. So what Mr Cummings is saying is that the person at the front of the photo there is a civil servant called Martin Reynolds, and he was sitting there with Mr Cummings. He's in the photo on the left, the picture at the table at the front of the picture. There's the PM and Carrie Johnson there. Mr Cummings said, I had several meetings at that table that day, and then he said the PMI continued after the meetings broke up. Someone brought a bottle of wine out to the table. It may have been Martin, but I think it was the PM himself who went inside. He said he carried on chatting about domestic priorities and so on. Here comes the latest allegation. There was a social event on May the 20th. I and at least one other SPAD, that's a special advisor, said this seemed to be against the rules and should not happen. We were ignored. I was ill and went home to bed early that afternoon, but I'm told this event definitely happened. What does all this mean? It means that Sue Gray, she's the civil servant investigating all these party allegations, is almost certain now to widen her inquiry to include not just the 15th of May, but this new allegation about the 20th of May.
The world men's tennis number one, Novak Djokovic, is nearing the end of his third day in an Australian government detention hotel after being denied entry into the country. Sky's Nicole Johnston joins us now from Melbourne. And Nicole, he is remaining in this hotel while the blame game continues.
That's right. It's essentially a waiting game now for Djokovic's team. We're standing in front of the detention hotel where, as you said, he's about to spend his third night. There's quite a heavy police presence here. Protesters have arrived, but not only is this hotel getting attention because the world's number one tennis player is here, it's also a hotel that houses refugee asylum seekers in Australia. There's more than 30 of them here. Many of them have been here for months and in some cases more than a year. At the same time, protesters are gathering. You can see some of them on the street behind us. Some of them are supporters, of course, of Novak Djokovic. Also, many of them are anti-vaxxers, saying that they don't believe in vaccination. An issue, though, that it's very controversial across Australia and especially here in Melbourne. Melbourne endured one of the world's longest lockdowns, more than 260 days. So a lot of people here don't have any sympathy for anybody who wants to enter the country and isn't properly vaccinated. As you said, there is a blame game going on. A leaked letter has come out from Tennis Australia in which it told tennis players that if they had been infected with COVID-19 in the previous 6 months, that they would be medically exempted and allowed to enter Australia. Now, it has since come out from the federal government that they told Tennis Australia that was not the case. So it's a very complicated situation here, but certainly it's left the Australian Open in chaos and the world's number one tennis player behind these doors, stuck in a hotel.
OK, Nicole in Melbourne, thank you. A father and son have been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the 2020 murder of black jogger Ahmaud Arbery. A judge in the US state of Georgia also gave a life sentence to their neighbour, but ruled that he could seek parole after 30 years in jail. Katie Barnfield reports.
Relief for the family of Ahmaud Arbery. Hand in hand, they walked down the courtroom steps after his killers were given life in prison.
I knew that today would come. When it would come, I didn't know, but I know today would finally come.
Yeah, amen.
On the 23rd of February 2020, Ahmaud Arbery, a black American, had gone out for a run in a predominantly white neighbourhood in the US state of Georgia and never came home. Instead, he was targeted by these three men who have now been sentenced for his murder. A judge said that Mr. Arbery was pursued in pickup trucks for 5 minutes before being cornered and shot by father and son, Greg and Travis McMichael, and their neighbour, William Bryan, who claimed they were attempting a citizen's arrest on a suspected burglar.
He was killed because individuals here in this courtroom took the law into their own hands.
But the case has again raised questions about racial justice in the southern United States. Mr. Arbery's family lawyers described the incident as a modern-day lynching, and in response to the jury's verdict in November, President Biden said, "We must recommit ourselves to building a future of unity and shared strength where no one fears violence because of the colour of their skin." The men waived their right to address the court at the hearing, but their lawyers say they plan to appeal the convictions. Katie Barnfield, Sky News.
Also making news this morning, 16 people have died and 10 others have been injured in an explosion at an office cafeteria in southwest China. It's believed a gas leak caused the blast. US President Joe Biden has comforted residents in Colorado who've had to rebuild their homes and businesses destroyed last week by a rare wind-whipped fire. 2 people were missing and feared dead after the blaze incinerated more than 1,000 dwellings. Mr. Biden says Colorado's most destructive wildfire marked another code red climate warning.
The situation is a blinking code red for our nation because the combination of extreme drought, the driest period from June to December ever recorded, unusually high winds, no snow on the ground to start, created a tinderbox, a literal tinderbox. And even if it was not your backyard, you could feel the ripple effects of what happened.
A Sky News investigation has revealed that huge numbers of weapons, including firearms and knives, have been seized in courtrooms during the pandemic. Official data shows that over 1,000 knives and blades have been confiscated in Crown courts since April 2020. It follows concerns over the security of courtrooms after the death of a man who managed to sneak acid into a dock before swallowing it. Head teachers are calling on the government to eradicate the double hit faced by school leaders among certain ethnic groups. The National Association of Head Teachers says staff of black, Asian or minority ethnic backgrounds risk being penalised by ethnicity wage inequality, as well as eroding pay across the sector. Some progress for people fighting to get cladding laws changed. Leaseholders living in buildings under 18 metres high will no longer have to pay for the potentially inflammatory cladding to be removed from the outside of their homes. A letter seen by Sky News from the Treasury to the Housing Secretary Michael Gove suggests that the Secretary of State will be able to threaten developers with taxation or what's been described as legal solutions to ensure they pay up. New research suggests asylum-seeking children who are separated from their parents are on average more than 3 years behind other pupils by the time they take their GCSEs. But a school in North London is working to break down the barriers holding back refugee children in the classroom. Aisha Zahid has been to meet some of the pupils and the staff offering them support.
These teenagers all have very different stories to share about how they arrived in the UK. But